Most people believe that once food is cooked, the hard part is over. You made the meal. You ate what you wanted. The leftovers go into the refrigerator, and tomorrow you warm them up, and that is the end of the story. Safe, convenient, and nothing to worry about. I used to think exactly the same way, until I started paying closer attention to the patterns that kept appearing in clinics and in food safety research. Patterns of sudden stomach upset in older adults. Patterns of mild illnesses that nobody could quite trace. Patterns of food-related discomfort that, on closer inspection, had one simple thing in common. The meal had been reheated, and it had been reheated in a way that quietly turned a safe food into a risky one. Here is what almost no one explains in everyday life. The way you reheat food matters. Sometimes it matters a lot. And certain common foods, reheated incorrectly, can cause real problems, especially as the body ages. Before we move on, make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Today, I am going to walk you through 5 common foods that deserve careful handling during storage and reheating, explain what actually happens inside them when they are mishandled, and give you practical steps that will protect your health without requiring any dramatic change to how you cook. This is not a video about throwing away all leftovers. Leftovers are practical, economical, and part of how most of us eat. The message is simply that a few specific foods behave in ways worth understanding, and once you know the patterns, the adjustments are easy to make. Let me begin with the core concept that explains almost everything about food safety at home. Bacteria that cause foodborne illness grow most rapidly in a temperature range often called the danger zone. That range, roughly between 40 degrees Fahrenheit and 140 degrees Fahrenheit, is where most harmful organisms multiply quickly. Hot food cooling slowly on a counter passes through that range. Cold food left out at room temperature enters that range. Reheated food that only reaches lukewarm temperature remains in that range. And here is where age becomes relevant. As the body ages, the immune system is somewhat less efficient at clearing infections. Stomach acid production often decreases, and many older adults take medications that further reduce stomach acidity. All of these changes mean that older adults can become noticeably sicker from smaller amounts of bacterial contamination than younger adults typically do. Food safety is not a new concern. It is just that the margin for error narrows with age. The first food to handle carefully is cooked rice. Most people are surprised to learn that rice can be associated with foodborne illness, because rice is one of the simplest foods in any kitchen. But here is what happens. Raw rice often contains spores of a common bacterium called Bacillus cereus. These spores survive normal cooking temperatures. When cooked rice is then left at room temperature for an extended period, the spores can germinate and produce toxins that are not destroyed by subsequent reheating. The resulting illness is usually mild, with nausea, vomiting, and cramping, and most younger adults recover quickly. In older adults, the same illness can cause more significant dehydration and electrolyte disturbances. The solution is straightforward. Cool cooked rice quickly after the meal. Move it into the refrigerator within an hour. Reheat it thoroughly until it is steaming hot all the way through, not just warm on the outside. And if rice has been sitting at room temperature for several hours, particularly overnight, the safest choice is simply to discard it. A second meal is not worth the risk of becoming ill. The second food category is cooked chicken and other poultry. Chicken is a staple in many households, and leftovers are common. The concern with chicken is not unusual compared to other meats, but the consequences of mishandling are often more significant, because poultry can harbor bacteria that cause more serious illness when growth is unchecked. The key principles are the same as with rice. Cool quickly, refrigerate promptly, and reheat thoroughly. But there is one specific issue worth highlighting. Many people reheat chicken in a microwave and assume that a minute or two produces uniform heating. In reality, microwaves heat unevenly. Thicker pieces may still have cool pockets inside, even when the outside feels hot. Cutting chicken into smaller pieces before reheating, stirring or turning partway through, and checking the internal temperature with a simple food thermometer all help ensure that the entire portion reaches a safe temperature. Reheating to an internal temperature of 165 degrees Fahrenheit throughout is the standard recommendation. And reheating chicken repeatedly, meaning a third or fourth round from the same original dish, is generally not recommended because each cycle of cooling and warming provides additional opportunity for bacterial growth between rounds. The third food category is leafy greens, particularly cooked spinach and similar vegetables. This one surprises many home cooks. Spinach, beet greens, and certain other leafy vegetables naturally contain relatively high levels of nitrates. When these vegetables are cooked and then stored, particularly if they are stored at temperatures above refrigeration temperature, bacteria present in the food can convert some of those nitrates to nitrites. Reheating cooked spinach does not remove the nitrites that have formed. For most younger adults eating small portions occasionally, this process does not cause meaningful harm. But the concern is more specific for two groups: infants, which is why pediatric guidance often discourages feeding reheated spinach to very young children, and older adults who may be more sensitive to the effects of nitrites on oxygen carrying capacity in the blood. The practical advice is simple. Cooked spinach and similar greens should be cooled quickly and refrigerated promptly. Reheating them once is generally fine for adult portions, but repeated reheating and prolonged storage are not recommended. When possible, it is often easier to cook these greens in the amount you plan to eat rather than storing and reheating. The fourth food category is eggs and egg-based dishes. This one includes boiled eggs, scrambled eggs, egg salads, quiches, and any dish where eggs are a major ingredient. Eggs are nutritious, convenient, and a common feature in older adult diets. But eggs can also be a vehicle for bacterial contamination, particularly Salmonella, which is why egg safety gets attention. The specific concerns with reheating are twofold. First, egg dishes need to be cooled and stored quickly after preparation. A plate of scrambled eggs left at room temperature for 3 hours, then refrigerated, is already compromised before it ever reaches the reheating stage. Second, when egg dishes are reheated, they must reach a consistent hot temperature throughout, not simply warm on the surface. Microwaving egg salad for 20 seconds, for example, may warm the outer layer while leaving the center cool, and the center is exactly where any bacterial growth would be most concerning. For egg-based casseroles and quiches, reheating in a conventional oven at moderate temperature until the center is fully hot is often a more reliable approach than a brief microwave session. There is one more specific point about eggs that deserves mention. Boiled eggs should be refrigerated within 2 hours of cooking if they are not being eaten, and generally should be consumed within about a week. Boiled eggs left at room temperature or stored for extended periods are a classic source of foodborne illness in case reports, and the consequences in older adults can be more significant than in younger ones. The fifth food category is cooked potatoes, particularly potatoes prepared in dishes such as mashed potatoes, potato salad, or roasted potatoes stored at room temperature before reheating. The concern with potatoes is a specific bacterium, Clostridium botulinum, which under certain conditions can produce toxins that cause a serious illness called botulism. This is particularly relevant for potatoes wrapped in foil and left at warm temperatures, because the foil creates the low oxygen environment where these bacteria can grow. Botulism is rare, but it is serious, and older adults with other health conditions can be particularly affected. The practical guidance is straightforward. Cooked potatoes, especially potatoes wrapped in foil, should not be left sitting at warm temperatures for extended periods. They should be refrigerated promptly. Potato salad, because it often contains mayonnaise or other ingredients, should be kept cold during meals and returned to the refrigerator promptly after eating. And reheating potatoes thoroughly, with high heat all the way through, is the safe approach. Now let me step back and discuss a few broader principles that apply to almost all reheating in any household. The first principle is cool quickly. Leftover food should be placed in shallow containers rather than deep ones so that it cools to refrigerator temperature faster. A large pot of stew placed directly in the refrigerator while still very hot actually cools slowly because the center of the pot stays warm for hours while the outside cools. Dividing the stew into shallow containers allows the whole volume to cool rapidly. The second principle is refrigerate promptly. The general guideline is to get leftovers into the refrigerator within 2 hours of cooking, or within 1 hour if the environment is particularly warm. The third principle is reheat thoroughly, not partially. If reheating on a stovetop, bring the food to a full simmer and maintain it for at least a minute or two. If reheating in a microwave, stir partway through, rotate if the microwave does not do so automatically, and check that the entire portion is steaming hot. The fourth principle is to avoid repeated reheating of the same food. Each round of cooling and warming provides opportunity for bacterial growth between rounds, and some of the toxins produced by certain bacteria are not destroyed by subsequent reheating. There is another practical consideration worth discussing. The length of time leftovers remain safe in the refrigerator. A useful general guideline is that most cooked leftovers are best consumed within 3 to 4 days, stored at proper refrigeration temperature of 40 degrees Fahrenheit or below. Beyond 4 days, the risk of bacterial growth rises meaningfully, even if the food still looks and smells fine. Smell and appearance are not reliable guides to food safety. Many of the organisms that cause foodborne illness do not produce visible changes or obvious odors. If a leftover has been in the refrigerator for a week, the safest choice is usually to discard it, regardless of how it appears. Freezing extends that timeline considerably. Most cooked foods can be safely frozen for several months, and the freezing process itself pauses bacterial growth entirely, although it does not kill bacteria that may already be present. When thawing frozen leftovers, the safest approach is to thaw in the refrigerator overnight, rather than at room temperature. Room temperature thawing allows the outer layers of the food to warm into the danger zone while the interior is still frozen, creating exactly the environment where bacteria can multiply rapidly. Let me share a practical story that illustrates why these principles matter. A woman in her early 70s called after several days of nausea, fatigue, and mild diarrhea that was not severe enough to seek emergency care, but significant enough to leave her depleted. When we walked through her recent meals, one pattern emerged. She had prepared a large pot of chicken and rice earlier in the week. She had eaten a portion the first night. The rest had been left on the stove, covered, overnight, and refrigerated the next morning. She had reheated a portion in the microwave for lunch, then reheated the same portion for a late dinner when her plans had changed. By the time she ate it, the food had gone through multiple cycles of cooling, warming, and warming again. She had not considered any of this unusual. She had always prepared food this way. The illness itself resolved with rest, hydration, and time, but the recovery was slower than she had expected, and she felt weakened for nearly 2 weeks. After that experience, she changed her habits. Smaller portions prepared at a time, prompt refrigeration, single round of reheating. Her meals became simpler, and her health became steadier. Her situation is not dramatic. It is, in fact, ordinary, and that is exactly why it is worth highlighting. Most food-related illness in older adults does not arrive as a crisis. It arrives as a mild but persistent issue that drains energy, interferes with nutrition, and sometimes triggers a cascade of dehydration and weakness that affects other aspects of health. Preventing these episodes is not complicated. It mostly requires a few small habits, applied consistently. There is one additional category worth mentioning, although it is slightly different from the others. Foods that should generally not be reheated at all or reheated with particular caution. Certain seafood, for example, can develop off flavors and potential safety concerns with extended storage and reheating. Cream-based sauces often separate and degrade in quality, though the safety concern depends on how they were stored. Foods that were served at room temperature on a buffet or potluck for an extended period before being collected as leftovers may have already spent significant time in the danger zone, and reheating does not undo that. When in doubt, discarding is always the safer choice. A single discarded portion is a far smaller loss than a day or two of illness. A brief word on microwave safety, because microwaves are the most common method of reheating in most households. Microwaves are excellent for reheating, but they heat unevenly, and food safety depends on ensuring that the entire portion reaches a safe temperature. Stirring partway through heating, covering the food loosely to promote even distribution of heat, allowing the food to stand for a minute or two after heating so that residual heat equalizes, and checking the temperature of the coolest spot are all small practices that make a meaningful difference. If a microwave reheat does not produce food that is thoroughly hot throughout, finishing the reheating on a stovetop or in a conventional oven is entirely reasonable. Now let me offer 4 practical questions worth asking yourself before reheating any meal. These are simple, but they translate the concepts above into daily practice. The first question: how long has this food been stored, and at what temperature? If the food spent more than 2 hours at room temperature before refrigeration, or more than about 4 days in the refrigerator, the answer may be to discard it rather than reheat it. The second question: how will I reheat this, and will the entire portion reach a safe hot temperature? If the plan is a 30-second microwave warm-up that leaves the food merely warm rather than hot throughout, it may be worth adjusting the approach. The third question: has this food already been reheated once? If so, another round of reheating is generally not recommended. The fourth question: is this a food that behaves differently during storage? Rice, poultry, leafy greens, eggs, and potatoes all deserve particular attention, as discussed throughout this video. These 4 questions take 30 seconds to think through, and they can prevent an enormous amount of avoidable illness. Let me leave you with a broader point that applies to almost everything in food safety. The older the body, the smaller the margin for error. A foodborne illness that leaves a 25-year-old uncomfortable for a day can leave a 75-year-old dehydrated, weak, and at genuine risk for hospitalization. This is not a reason to become anxious about food. It is a reason to apply a few small habits consistently. Cool quickly. Refrigerate promptly. Reheat thoroughly. Do not repeat reheating cycles. Respect the 4-day rule. Pay attention to the specific foods that behave in ways worth understanding. These habits, practiced over time, quietly prevent a significant number of avoidable illnesses. There is one more topic worth a few minutes of attention because it comes up often and it is often misunderstood: the role of the refrigerator itself. Many home refrigerators run warmer than their ideal setting. The recommended refrigerator temperature is at or below 40 degrees Fahrenheit, and the recommended freezer temperature is 0 degrees Fahrenheit or below. An inexpensive refrigerator thermometer, placed on a middle shelf, will reveal whether the appliance is actually holding the right temperature. Many people are surprised to find that their refrigerator is running at 42, 43, or even 45 degrees. That difference of a few degrees may seem minor, but over the course of several days, it meaningfully affects how quickly bacteria can grow in stored leftovers. A simple thermometer check every few months is a small habit with a real payoff. Similarly, overcrowding the refrigerator can reduce airflow and create warmer pockets, especially near the door. Leaving some space between containers allows cold air to circulate and keeps temperatures more uniform throughout. Another practical point concerns the container itself. Glass containers and sturdy food-grade plastic containers are both fine, but the key is that they should seal well to prevent drying out and to keep odors from transferring between foods. Covering leftovers with a loose piece of plastic wrap or foil is not ideal for extended storage because air exposure accelerates quality decline and can invite contamination. A proper sealed container, clearly labeled with the date of preparation, is one of the simplest and most effective habits in any kitchen. The date label in particular takes the guesswork out of the 4-day rule. Without a date, it is easy to lose track of when a leftover was made and easy to keep something too long out of simple uncertainty. Food is one of the most fundamental pleasures of life. The goal of everything discussed today is not to make eating feel like a minefield. It is to make eating safer with almost no additional effort. A few shallow containers, a thermometer that costs very little, a willingness to discard a leftover that has been stored too long. These small changes are quiet, but they protect health in ways that add up meaningfully over time. Everything shared today is general food safety information, drawn from widely recognized public health guidance and clinical patterns. Specific questions about diet, food allergies, or individual medical conditions should always be discussed with your own doctor or a registered dietitian. They know your history, your medications, and the full context of your situation. That conversation, thoughtful and specific to you, is exactly where good everyday health begins. Take care of yourself, pay attention to your kitchen, and give your meals the simple handling they deserve so that they nourish you rather than cause trouble.